Gideon Chitanga is a research associate at the Africa Center for Study of the United States at the University of the Witwatersrand here in Johannesburg. He joins us now to tell us a little bit more about the BRICS gathering. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program. China seems to be leading a chant of a new way, a new world order. Hello, Gideon.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you. I wouldn't define it as like a push for a new world order necessarily, but I think that there's a consensus, particularly for countries from the global south, that the traditional Western-dominated global governance system is exclusionary and unfair for most of the developing countries or these growing economies. And if you recall, the major reason why the BRICS emerged, it was out of the 2008 economic crisis, and also the discontent with how key institutions like the IMF and the World Bank made it difficult for developing economies to continue to economically sustain themselves by providing services, the requisite services they required from these institutions. The second thing is there has been, I think, a kind of a consensus amongst these developing countries to create a lobby which they drive, a platform in which they can talk to each other and be heard equally in terms of politically influencing global governance, influencing institutions such as the UN and the United Nations Assembly. So this provides a base for the BRICS, and economic concerns and economic and political solidarity have been the fundamental corners which are driving BRICS as a platform where developing countries can lobby for the transformation of the global governance system to make it more fair and more inclusive, for them to be heard as key stakeholders in the global economy and as part of the political society. So I guess that what China is saying is along those lines, that we are developing countries, we are a group of very powerful developing economies, 47% of the global population, translating to approximately 3.23 billion people. That's a big constituency. That's a big global constituency. 23 trillion of the GDP, 17% of global trade, about 4 trillion in foreign currency reserves. So this is what the BRICS is, and it's a demographic and a political clout. And economic clout, it gives it such importance that it cannot continue to be ignored. And the northern economies have to actually look at the potential and cooperate fairly and equally with these emerging countries.
I hear what you're saying, and I just wonder, is this not all code for a Cold War that's taking place between the US on the one side, Russia and China on the other, and that everybody else is caught in the middle?
I think that if you follow different media platforms, you get the idea that the global setting is shifting into a more multilateral platform beyond a hegemonic geopolitical order, which was singularly controlled by the West. In my view, such a shift does not have to recreate World War politics. Unfortunately, political behaviors might commonly take long to transform, and they tend to follow behind key events. What I think is that the world is sitting at a great opportunity where a spirit of dialogue and inclusiveness should be informing interaction. And if that were to happen, surely different perspectives would emerge from different spaces and different leaders because of different historical circumstances and contexts. But there's also room to say that the emergence from a hegemonic, singularly dominated geopolitical setting to a multilateral setting is potentially more peaceful, especially if it's based on a respectful dialogue that respects other states without contemptuously treating other players, creating common values and allowing emerging new governance structures and rules and norms to govern society. So I see what you mean. I get it from a lot of the media, but I think that we are also sitting at a very opportune moment where these key players can drive the global society towards a more peaceful, stable order based on common respect, common mutual respect to emerging values and emerging norms. And the emergence of BRICS does not have to necessarily be viewed as a countervailing or an adversarial platform, but it should be imaged, it should be listened to and embraced as a community of equals, of parties that seek to be equal actors in the community of our nations, and their concerns should be addressed. Going back to the history of the emergence of the BRICS, one key point that BRICS leaders have continuously stated is that they are not looking at competing with the already existing institutions, but they look at complementing and improving norms and values and rules and making sure that every part to the global economy, meaning every country, every leader, should equally act in a mutually respectful manner.
Does belonging to BRICS mean that you have to protect each other at all costs? Or do they have very frank discussions, brother to brother? Because perhaps a conversation needs to be had as to, dear Russia, was this the best way to solve this problem? Or, dear Russia, can you find a way to withdraw from this invasion?
The stated values of BRICS are dialogue, equal dialogue, inclusiveness. So you could say, in that sense, there's a spirit of objective engagement and dialogue within the BRICS. And what we get as its opposite is coercive diplomacy, the use of force combined with sanctions. The difference between what is potentially coming out of BRICS and what we understand as the Western behavior in terms of supporting how the West has supported the Ukrainians by arming and reinforcing military action. For me, it is a difference in how conflict could be dealt with. Yes, we can say that the rhetoric of dialogue without seeing where it's going is causing some difficulties in seeing what other countries which have said we prefer dialogue and mediation and negotiation because it's not happening. But you could also say as a counter argument, the others have decided to take a military route, a militaristic route, which is paralleled by the use of sanctions. And what we see is that the conflict has intensified. The implications are huge because they've gone from military to global economic impacts and to affecting everybody. So I think that coming to the table entails the conflict parties themselves in the Ukraine conflict, but also the other concerned parties talking to each other. And by this, I mean there should be a way in which we say there's a responsibility from key actors in the West to be talking to the BRICS members, because we are talking about the BRICS right now, but other actors, other key actors, to bring the major conflict parties on the table and end the bloodshed in Ukraine.
Is there anything that South Africa can do for the continent through its BRICS membership? The Ukraine conflict has seen us experience challenges that are quite profound. An example, Zimbabwe inflation there went from 60% to 131%, due in part, a large part, to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Is there a conversation that South Africa can have on behalf of Africa so that maybe Russia and China can mitigate some of the effects of this invasion?
Certainly, so I think South Africa is the gateway for African countries into multilateral institutions. But we know that South Africa has stated its position as dialogue and mediation to try and resolve the conflict in Ukraine. We understand as well that leaders from the African Union paid a visit to President Putin, and they had conversations about the consequences of the conflict. They had his perspective, and they also made it clear that the conflict is supposed to end. The issues related or tied to sanctions, which were imposed on Russia, need also to be resolved. They stated that it is important for dialogue, continuous dialogue, to address the key issues that are driving conflict to be resolved. So I take it that this is, in a very general way, the position that South Africa is standing on and possibly sharing with other leaders. The problem is, once a conflict is militarized and you have a lot of actors, and some of them big actors, for a country like South Africa, for us as Africa, the room to maneuver becomes limited. My hope is that instead of continuously to militarily escalating the conflict in Ukraine, I also hope that European leaders, and the US in particular, can proactively engage other actors in a very sincere way to open dialogue with a view to make sure that the conflict ends as soon as possible, because the ramifications, I mean, in any conflict, before we even talk about the global implications, just the loss of life, even one life, it's too much. I would prefer a world that is peaceful and human life and human rights of individuals and communities are respected. And that is not what we are getting from Ukraine. The implications to the global community is severe, but it takes a lot of the key actors that are not part of the conversations or find it difficult to find room to maneuver, to create dialogue, to create mediation, to continue to do that because of the militarization of the conflict.
All right, so we've run out of time, but perhaps you can answer this last question briefly. Do you think that BRICS has lived up to expectations? Formed 2009, which is quite a while now. It was about reshaping the global economy and a new financial order. I just wonder if you can very briefly tell me if you think we've lived up to these expectations, because the conversation that you've been giving us suggests that the fight still goes on.
Yes, the fight still goes on, but there are critical achievements. And one good example is the creation of the new development bank. It's doing great work. It has potential to do more. BRICS has created a platform for conversations like we're having, like the conversation that is happening now among developing economies, growing and exploring opportunities to exploit intra-development country relations. I think that is very important. But there is potential to do more, and I hope that this meeting that is happening now will come up with more action plans and interventions, particularly to stimulate economic growth in the global south exiting COVID.